Another day, another story. Once again I greet you, my dear readers. Today's story, I suggest, may be perplexing to some Christians. Some believers think that their children or the children of Christian families cannot do as my story describes. I want to assure you they can. Our children are not born Christians, they must become Christians, so let us help them by setting an example of virtue, mercy, and compassion for others. What do you think of this? The story was written in February 2005. Everyone knows that children, and adults too, like to laugh more than they like to cry. No one likes to cry. And where there is laughter, there is joy. But is it always so? Sometimes one person's laughter brings pain and sorrow to another, because it hurts his soul. But children, as a rule, do not think about it. Today I want to tell you, my young friends, about a little girl who loved to laugh. Her name was Kasiusha. Like all children her age, and Kasiusha was 10 years old, she went to school. And most often the reason for her laughter was someone else's shortcoming. For example, she laughed when Gosha Savan wiped his mouth with his sleeve after lunch, or when Fatty Anetta tried to do a somersault over her head in gym class and fell awkwardly on her side. In general, there were many reasons to laugh. Classmates tried to be friends with Zusha. Some thought she was witty and appreciated it, while others were simply afraid to get on her tongue and be laughed at. At home, Kasiusha sighed heavily when her grandmother tried to explain why it was a sin to mock and ridicule one's neighbor. And her father once left Kasiusha without sweets because she had laughed at a hunchbacked man that they had met in the park while the family was walking. But it wasn't my fault he had such a hump. The girl tried to justify herself. But it is your fault for laughing at his handicap, the father replied. You can't even laugh, thought Kasiusha with displeasure, so now I can't walk around with a sad look and say a funny word to anyone? Of course not. Her father did not mean that it is impossible to smile and laugh, but his words the girl could not understand until a terrible thing happened to her. There was a girl in the same class as Kasiusha. Her name was Masha. The boys considered Masha to be quiet and communicated little with her. The reason for her timid behavior was her eyes. Masha wore glasses, but they could not hide her squinting. And when some of the boys said something about squinting eyes, Masha blushed and her face became sad. But no one paid any attention to that. Most often it was Kasiusha who mocked Masha. Oh, Mashenka, she began Kasiusha in a tender voice, how well you look today. At these affectionate words among the other girls ran a chuckle. But why don't you look at me, what have I done to you? And all the girls who heard this burst out laughing happily. Only one girl could not laugh, and it is clear why. In such cases, Masha usually turned away and silently walked away. And only an attentive eye could notice how she wiped a tear from under her glasses during the lesson. True, and Shusha herself sometimes felt sorry for the offended classmate, but something overpowered her, and mockery rushed down again and again. Maybe the desire for primacy in the circle of friends was the cause, or even thoughtlessness, but, as always happens, there comes a day and an hour that makes you stop and think about his words. And that hour has come. Having hastily done her homework, Kasiusha sat down in an armchair and watched her little brother. The boy, setting the desk lamp on the floor and squatting amusingly, was looking for something on the floor. Apparently, he found what he was looking for, because he cried out happily and ran out of the room. Kasiusha sat motionless in her chair for a while, and then stood up and went over to the lamp and squatted down. The light of the lamp blinded so that it was difficult to look. The girl squinted her eyes. Leaning over the lamp, Kasiusha felt a whiff of warmth. And suddenly, she did not know why, she spat on the red-hot bulb. There was a loud pop, and, with a loud cry, Kasiusha clamped her hand over her right eye. The bulb burst, shattering into tiny pieces. At the scream of a girl's parents came running. Kasiusha was silent for a while, then unable to endure the pain, she cried. Realizing what had happened, her parents went pale. Daddy had a hard time convincing the girl to remove her hands to examine her eye. A shard of glass gleamed in his very pupil. Daddy called for an ambulance, and in the meantime Mom helped Zusha get dressed. The hushed children stood aside, not daring to utter a word. Only Grandma broke the anxious silence. She was crying and, through her tears, somehow incoherently, either reasoning or affirming, praying to God. Merciful God, help us. The poor child will be left without an eye. What if he goes blind? Save. So she went through all the troubles that could result from what had happened and asked God for mercy and a miracle. Her speech must have had a negative effect on those around her, because Dad, unable to stand it, said firmly, "Mom, please stop." An ambulance came, and Kasiusha and her parents went to the hospital. All this time Kasiusha did not stop crying. Fear for her eye drove her to despair. To lose my eye or go blind? No. Lord, please don't let it happen. She mentally cried out. And immediately a picture clearly appeared before her eyes. Here she was with a blindfold, and someone was laughing at her and saying, "What beautiful eyes you have, come on, look at me." A sharp stinging pain pierced her heart. In those moments, the girl as if visited the place of classmate Masha. She vividly felt all the anxiety and resentment on herself. Sweet Masha, how much you have had to endure, Kasiusha thought bitterly, but from this day forward everything will be different, I promise you. And immediately, in the ambulance, there was her confession. Kasiusha told her parents that she had laughed at the squint-eyed girl at school. She said that she was very sorry for the many times she had caused her neighbors pain and suffering. "Please pray for me," Kasiusha asked. "I will never do that again." Mom calmed her daughter as best she could. Her lips were pale, but she did not lose her balance. Daddy prayed for his daughter right in the car, and that calmed Zusha down a bit. There was no delay on the ward. The girl was immediately taken to an operating room without letting her say goodbye to her parents. Here the doctors were already waiting for her. They had been notified by telephone. An elderly nurse tried to speak to Zusha gently, and that calm voice made the girl relax. Then an injection was given to her, and Kasiusha did not remember anything else. She woke up already in the ward. Consciousness returned slowly. Where am I? What's wrong with me? Where are Mom and Daddy? Her thoughts swirled one after another. And gradually Kasiusha began to remember everything that had happened. The door opened, and a man in a white coat entered the room. Smiling kindly, he approached the bed. "Well, sweetheart, won't you spit on the light bulb again?" Thank God that everything turned out all right. In cases like this, it is rare. Kasiusha tried to smile. "But, no, don't cry," the doctor said, noticing the tears that came to his eyes. "Everything will be fine. Today and tomorrow you will stay here, and then go home to your mom and dad. Sleep now, it's nighttime." The door of the room closed as quietly as it opened, and Kasiusha was left alone. Now she knew that God had heard her prayer and spared her trouble. Oh, how glad Zusha was. She was determined that after all she had experienced, she would never again hurt the feelings of her neighbors by making fun of their shortcomings. And if I really want to make fun of somebody, she thought, I will make fun of myself, for I have many faults too.